Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with the 12 greatest harmonists of all time. Bar none. You got it. In our last episode, as you may recall, we were talking about the 12 greatest contrapuntists of all time. Some of you pedantically suggested that should have been contrapuntalists, or polyphonicists, or polyphonatialicious. It doesn't matter as long as you know who it is. The bottom line is that counterpoint tends to evoke a certain academic stuffiness. And I noted in the comments a certain pedantry. How dare you leave out composer so-and-so? Or, it's shocking that what about blah, and oh my goodness. Well, like I said before with all of these talks, you want someone else? Make your own damn list. What's the big deal? That's what the comments are for. You can stick them in. I may even not delete it if I think it's a good list. Most of them are. I mean, you folks really tend to know what you're talking about, sometimes far more than I do. So yeah, don't worry about who's on my list and who's off my list. I have my justification, which I am about to explain to you. And you give me yours. And everyone's happy. Because there's no reason why the greatest anything, fill in the blank, has to be limited to 12 or 5 or 20 or, there are however many there are. I'm only talking about a limited number, the ones who I think are the most important in my opinion. But of course, there's always your opinion. And believe it or not, I tend to respect your opinion. I read every single comment that comes in, and believe me, that takes quite a bit of time when you have as many subscribers as we do now. So feel free, stick in your names, but don't get all huffy about whose list they're on or why you would take this one out and stuff that one in. Just add them. Just add them. It's very, very simple. So, the 12 greatest harmonists of all time. We're talking about affecting, gorgeous, glorious, marvelous harmony, vertical sonority, and vertical sonority spread out over larger sections and things that you can do with harmony. Oh, it's just a wonderful topic, which I can't even begin to touch on other than to give you the list. So let's get to the list, shall we? J.S. Bach. Anybody who could do 140,000 Lutheran chorale harmonizations, as part of his, breakfast routine, has to be one of the greatest harmonists of all time. He was. Harmony and polyphony, counterpoint, as you may note, are intimately related, extremely intimately related. And so, since Bach was the greatest ever contrapuntist, he's got to be a great harmonist too. It just sort of comes with the territory. And after Bach, Haydn. Haydn's use of harmony was important, not just because he could do unbelievably surprising, funny. He used harmony in ways to expand the language of music more than any other composer before him, frankly, or after. I really believe that. It's particularly the case in establishing the standard forms of music, the sonata forms of music. He used harmony in a way that created movement, goal direction, narrative, all kinds of fabulous ways, long-term harmonic perspectives. Haydn was the guy who gave us all of that. And it's really an amazing thing, which I hope you're enjoying with me as we run through the Haydn Symphony Crusade, which, as of this moment, is up to symphony number 90. We're coming up on, well, baby, we're almost at the end of that. But Haydn was harmony. Whoa, baby, yes, incredible. Beethoven was actually, it's very interesting. It's very interesting. Beethoven, has the reputation as like the crazy revolutionary and all of that stuff. But he was an exceptional musical thinker. And it was Beethoven who really established the rules of classical harmony and modulation. That is, how to get from one key to another. in Beethoven's sonatas and symphonies and other things, all of this is completely systematized. And again, that's a topic I can't get into in any detail. Tovey, the great Donald Francis Tovey, talks about it extensively. But it was Beethoven who took up Haydn's concept, basic concept, and applied it to the entire world of classical harmony. And that's why Beethoven's piano sonatas, for example, are still like, the meat and potatoes of harmonic analysis classes, and why Beethoven's piano sonatas became the exemplars of academic sonata forms later in the 19th century. It was because of his handling of key areas, tonality, harmony. His long-term approach really was unbelievably, extraordinarily systematic. That doesn't mean he couldn't do surprises and he couldn't be spontaneous. Of course he did. But he had a method. And it was the method that became the model for just about everything that came afterwards, harmonically speaking. Really a fantastically important composer in that respect. Then, Schubert. Schubert, because he was the opposite of Beethoven. Schubert just would grab a chord and say, that sounds great, plonk it in somewhere. He was not the systematic harmony person. He was the affecting harmony person, the guy who could integrate sort of surprising, even shocking harmonic digressions and special things in unusual places. Really just amazing. Spacey, totally different. He was heading towards a more systematic way of thinking about harmony at the time that he died. But, his gift was spontaneity. Harmonic spontaneity. Just you never were quite sure where it was going. And sometimes it went places and had trouble getting back. It was sort of digressive, but it was always just marvelously affecting at the moment that you hear it. After Schubert, Berlioz. Oh, Berlioz. Berlioz, Tovey, the aforementioned Tovey, said of Berlioz that he achieved everything a composer could achieve, given the fact that he hated counterpoint, which is true. Berlioz had a terrible time at the Paris Conservatory. He didn't get along with anybody. There were a couple people he did, but basically he was totally anti-academic. And he was another spontaneous harmonist and a wonderful one. Just think of the finale of the Symphonie Fantastique. Where does that spooky stuff come from? He just pulled it out of his head, like, Athena popping out of the head of Zeus, fully formed. Berlioz was one of the great romantic harmonists. And along with Berlioz, Chopin. Chopin's harmony was recognized from the very, very beginning as completely individual and unbelievably emotionally moving. And puzzling to people. Its origins were in the Italian opera, Italian bel canto, and he took that and ran with it, mixing it with some Polish folk music and some other things that he sort of picked up along the way, and it was extraordinary. If you read reviews of his music, contemporary reviews of his music, the appreciative ones at least, actually the other ones too. Some people called his music, a farrago of miscellaneous and pointless modulations just for their own sake. But others just said, I don't understand where this is coming from, but it is incredibly powerful stuff. And so it was. Wagner owed a lot to Chopin, to his handling of chromaticism and all that. It's just a much more important composer than he's often given credit for being. After Chopin, Dvorak. Dvorak, of course, for his magnificent integration of the melos of his Czech folk music, his background, eventually, when he started to do that. And he was another composer who learned to discipline himself, which is fascinating because he knew what he needed. We talked recently about a disc containing his Slavonic Rhapsodies and the early Rhapsody, Opus 14 or whatever it was, a Rhapsody in A minor, which he also called symphonic poem, which is nothing but a formless heap of music that you could just imagine. It's wonderful to listen to. It's full of good tunes. It's colorful. It doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't know why it's doing anything. The connections between sections are absolutely acts of desperation. It's wonderful. It's wonderful to listen to because it tells us so clearly. I mean, Dvorak was honest, if nothing else, right? And it tells us so clearly what he needed to acquire to give his harmony potency. And he did. He acquired it. He acquired that formal discipline, the structural discipline. That's why Brahms was so amazed when he encountered Dvorak, because here was a composer who was independently pursuing a very similar path that Brahms had pursued, the idea of taking romantic music, romantic harmony, these wonderful discoveries in terms of, instant emotional affect, and applying it in terms of long-range structures and the grand forms of the classical masters. And that's what Dvorak was able to do. And the more he did that, the more wonderful his harmony became. I mean, think of things like the American String Quartet, which is a totally marvelous harmonic idiom, but it's presented with such cogency in terms of clarity of form and articulation, and of course those gorgeous melodies that Dvorak just churned out, rather like Schubert. In that respect, he was similar to Schubert, and Dvorak acknowledged that. He knew that. He felt a kinship with Schubert, particularly in his handling of melodies that switched between major and minor in mid-stride. Schubert was a master at that. So was Dvorak. It was an aspect of Slavic melodic practice. Anyway, so Dvorak's definitely there. Then we have Debussy. A lot of you mentioned Debussy in terms of like symphonic orchestration, which was like nonsense, and some other things. Dvorak was definitely, Debussy was certainly not a contrapuntist. He was a chord guy, and as a chord guy, harmony was his thing. Whole tone harmony, modal harmony, traditional harmony. As long as it was harmony, Debussy was into it. He was a harmonist. Oh my goodness, what an amazing harmonist, revolutionary, incredible stuff. So Debussy has to be included, of course. That this is his home base. He is the king of harmony. We call it impressionist harmony, but it wasn't. It was an entirely new system or way of thinking about harmony, and the meaning of harmony and the use of harmony. It's incredible stuff. And after Debussy, of course, we have to have finally also Wagner. Wagner, people who like Wagner think he's the greatest at everything. People who like any composer think they're the greatest at everything. But they're not, and they don't have to be, because genius composers are good at everything. That doesn't mean the recipe, that the balance of elements is equally prominent in all aspects of their art. And it shouldn't be, because if everybody was equally good at everything would sound the same. It would just be a featureless blob of I don't know what. It's the differences that make these people interesting, the imbalances. So Wagner was a harmony guy, ever from Tristan and Isolde. Holy cow! The Tristan chord, chromatic harmonies, sludge. He invented all of it. Oh yes, I give him full credit for it. And so I hope all you Wagner people are happy, because that's where he belongs, as well as, one of the greatest orchestrators ever, especially in the field of opera. Not symphonic orchestration, but operatic orchestration. Wagner always claimed that his approach was symphonic, which is bullshit. It was never symphonic. His symphony was horrible. And so let's just be clear about that. Wagner was an amazing harmonist. And really, when you think about it, theatrical composers have to be, because they have to be able to characterize the moment, the theatrical moment. It's not about, a larger musical process. It's about something happening that's dictated by a libretto, by a text, and stuff happens dictated by the text, and the pace at which that operates can be very, very different from the pace of music. So in the theater, harmony is the thing. It really is. And Wagner was one of those. After Wagner, Vaughan Williams. Oh, the revenge of modality. That's Vaughan Williams. His readoption, rediscovery of modal harmony and placing it at the disposal of sort of traditional forms and syntax. In other words, getting it to move the way classical harmony did in his symphonies, having it not just lay there like a Palestrina mass lays there, or some of these early Renaissance things. They're beautiful, they're incredibly beautiful, but they don't have drama. Vaughan Williams was able to dramatize modal music, which was quite an achievement, and the result was strikingly modern. I mean, it had a modern feel, but in a sort of an ancient quality at the same time. Really, really amazing stuff. And Bartok has popped up quite a few times. I mean, he was an incredible contrapuntist. He really was amazing contrapuntist. He was a fabulous orchestrator, as some of you guys pointed out. I did include him in my symphonic list because I think there are other people who are a bit more interesting, but Bartok was major in that area. He did do a lot of things with texture and percussion sonorities and all kinds of things like that. But as a harmonist, oh yes, because Bartok was the guy who was able to integrate his folk studies. I mean, he was an ethnomusicologist, a major one, and he studied folk music and integrated it into his musical language, and it was an avant-garde musical language for much of his career. And it was avant-garde not by virtue of the fact that he was throwing away the rules and invented things that had never been done before, but because he was using the material that he found. And he realized that it operated according to entirely different principles, as opposed to traditional harmony. I remember very, very vividly. We were listening in one of my music appreciation classes. We had an opportunity to listen to some of the folk songs that Bartok collected when we were studying his fourth string quartet. And the finale, it's one of those, the violins are going crazy. It's going, rah, 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 rah. It's like dissonant as all hell, and the rhythms are crazy. And you think, my God, that's just so advanced. And then we heard the folk music that Bartok had been collecting. And there was this folk song with this Hungarian violinist guy. And it sounded just like the finale of the fourth quartet, only worse. I mean, the violin is just ripping along, and then the harmonies are totally crunching and quarter tonal and dissonant. This guy is shrieking in some Hungarian dialect, and my God, I mean, Stockhausen wouldn't have come up with anything that frightening. And that's what Bartok was able to do. And again, like all the great harmonists, he turned it into a systematic language. And I don't mean that in a pedantic sense. What I mean is a systematic language that was capable of expressing whatever he wanted to express. So it was an amazing achievement. And last but not least, as the greatest harmonists in the universe, Poulenc. Poulenc is a guy who never gets any respect. I mean, he gets more than he used to. But Poulenc always said that there must be room for great music based on other people's chords. And that was what Poulenc did. Poulenc took stuff that he found from everywhere, the classical music, from Parisian street music, popular music, jazz. He didn't care. And he somehow amalgamated it into a coherent language that was fabulous because it was capable of turning on a dime. He could go from Mozart to, the Moulin Rouge to, whatever, within one bar. Because Poulenc his music operates in like little 2-bar sniglets. And each of those sniglets is sort of governed by its own rules of harmony. And somehow they all connect together. It's astonishing. It's extraordinary. You could be going along with the purest classical faux Mozart, for example, the slow movement of his double piano concerto. And then all of a sudden you hear a chord that's like this. Or his endings, which always seem to veer off into some strange tonal territory before just going thunk and dismissing whatever's happening. He was able to pull chords out of his ass, literally, and make amazing music with them. It's an astonishing style, which I really think kind of defies academic analysis, which is one of the reasons why he tends not to be taken that seriously. Because, musicologists have no conception of how to deal with music that just works. It just does what it's supposed to do. And it's fabulous and we love it, but it doesn't adhere to a particular system, which is, amenable to the strict analytical language that has been developed in our scholarly sphere, which is largely German. So, composers who did other things, well, they're sort of, unanalyzable. And no one is more unanalyzable than Poulenc. He's just amazing. So there you have it, the 12 greatest harmonists of all time and why they belong on the list. And if you want to stuff other people in there, feel free to stuff away. Just let me know why they belong on your list. Not mine, yours. It's your list. So keep on listening, friends. Thanks so much for joining me. Take care.